So, Joseph, his story is packed with just about everything you can imagine: tension, conflict, sibling rivalry, name calling, dreams, hatred, jealousy, conspiracy to kill, betrayal, cruelty, and there's blood money, 20 pieces of silver that he was sold for, immense grief, attempted seduction, imprisonment, release, a rise to power, famine, deceit, and revelation. It's all there. It reads like a dramatic suspense novel, and I think it would actually make a nail-biting movie, and I'm sure it has been. I have not seen it. So the story of Joseph is actually 14 chapters of Genesis. It's a very long story. And it stands in between the stories of God's faithfulness to the patriarchs, Adam, Isaac, and Jacob, and God's future deliverance of the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt under the leadership of Moses. And it also explains how the Hebrew people got to Egypt in the first place. Now, a bit about Joseph's lineage, just to refresh our memories. Abraham had a son, Isaac, and Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Joseph was born to Jacob, so that's how we got here. Now, we're not going to read the whole 14 chapters. I had written up the whole story. Just give me a moment, and let's look at some. I'd like to have you all, if you wouldn't mind, help to read this. So if y'all don't mind taking a turn, just read as much as you want and then pass it to the next person. Why don't we start here?
Themes. Eventually, Joseph works his way up and ends up in charge of all that Potiphar owns, because Potiphar has recognized Joseph's skill and also that Joseph is a godly person. The text says, "The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands."
Potiphar's wife had her eye on Joseph and propositions him. When he refuses, she falsely accuses him of assault. Joseph is thrown in jail. The chief jailer soon recognizes Joseph's skills and the presence of God within Joseph and puts Joseph in charge of all the prisoners.
Once again, as the text says, the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. While he is in prison, Joseph correctly interprets dreams of Pharaoh's servants who have been imprisoned. Eventually, Pharaoh learns about Joseph's interpretation skills and is released from prison because Pharaoh himself has dreamed some puzzling dreams.
Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams that predict an upcoming famine. He boldly suggests a plan to Pharaoh that will keep the people of Egypt from starving. Pharaoh accepts the plan and puts Joseph in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Joseph is second only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph is now 30 years old. Remember, he was 17 when he was sold into slavery.
Sure enough, the famine happens. But because Joseph had prepared ahead of time, there is food in Egypt. Meanwhile, the famine has spread, and infects Joseph's family, and Joseph's father tells his brothers to go to Egypt and buy food for their family.
Now, ironically, Joseph's dream of his brothers bowing before him is finally fulfilled. As the brothers come before him to buy food, they do indeed bow down to the powerful Joseph.
Joseph plays some cat and mouse games with his brothers before he reveals who he is to them.
He finally does reveal his identity. "I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive your many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt.
Joseph's father and brothers moved into Egypt to be with Joseph. Joseph arranges it so they get the best and most plentiful land to live on, with all their livestock and extended family.
Following Joseph's death, Joseph's brothers offered to become Joseph's slaves, fearing Joseph's punishment now since their father is dead. Instead, Joseph says, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones."
Thank you, everybody. It's good to hear all your voices. Amidst all that intense drama, in the end of Joseph's story, there's forgiveness. There's reconciliation, and there's life. And most importantly, through all that action and drama, God is present. God is at work preserving life through the people in the story. Now, as I read the story, there were a lot of directions to go. And it's always interesting how it happens that I end up in one direction. I can't say that I've ever preached on the story of Joseph with this focus. I'm choosing life. To explore the story with a focus on life, on a God who tends and preserves life, as Colin Cornell writes in his commentary on The Working Preacher. And on our part, our responsibility, actually, in working toward God's intent and purposes of a thriving life for all people. We can look at the story of Joseph and actually notice parallels in the creation story. God created humans and put them in charge of caring for creation, for the garden, providing life, preserving life, taking care of one another and all the animals in the garden, the plants. Through various events in Joseph's life, God also places Joseph in charge of caring for people, specifically providing food for the preservation of life during this famine. God is working through Joseph to preserve life and create a new life for the Hebrew people. Joseph uses his skills and his talents as God's agent, working toward God's purposes of tending to people's lives so that all people can flourish. And through Joseph, God keeps God's promise to Abraham generations ago that Abraham's ancestors would be numerous, because as we heard, Joseph arranged it so that his family, Jacob's family, had the best land in Egypt, and they prospered. They were fruitful and multiplied. They prospered, thrived. We are to be all about life. As we seek to follow Jesus, this is our task, our work here on earth, to help assure that people have the opportunity to thrive, that they're safe from violence, that they have enough food, enough shelter, enough friendship, laughter, mental health resources, and the list goes on and on about what is needed for one's survival, one's thriving. After all, God did create us for relationship and companionship and to take care of one another. I think that's somewhere in the Bible. Take care of one another. I believe that God expects us, like the first humans and like Joseph, to use our talents to take care of others so that they may thrive. We are God's agents. Not a phrase we often use. We are God's agents who work on behalf of God through the power of the Spirit toward God's purposes of life. Friends, that is holy work. That is holy work that God entrusts us to. No one ever said that the work of God is easy, that being God's agent is easy. Look at Joseph and everything that he goes through. But through the challenges and difficulties, whether we are aware of it or whether we sense it, God is at work. God is present through all of it. Cornell writes, God will work even in hidden ways through God's agents and deputies in order to preserve life. The process of making such agents fit for service may be long and indirect. Joseph faced deep hardships, false starts, doldrums, but the Lord was with him, and he remained open, apparently, to God's initiatives, even when it came obliquely through his fellow prisoners or dreams of a foreign ruler. End quote. God uses all kinds of ways to speak to us, but our ears have to be open. Friends, how is God wanting to shape and mold us, each one of us, into God's agents for this holy work to which we have been tasked? I've been thinking a lot about that this week. How are we putting our skills and our talents to work in God's service for the thriving of all people? Well, let's look to Joseph. He doesn't throw up his hands in despair and surrender when facing the looming famine. He also doesn't really look to God for a miracle. He does not expect God to miraculously, without Joseph's doing anything, take care of everything, though God certainly can do that. Joseph, I think, knows God is present in this. Joseph gets to work. He goes to work making a plan to provide the food that's going to give life to the people in his command. And furthermore, he implements the plan when the famine is nowhere in sight. Remember, there were 7 years of plenty before. He gets to work on this plan. There's not even a hint of a famine. All the crops are growing abundantly. But Joseph trusts God and steps out because he believes what God spoke to Pharaoh in that dream, that sure enough, there would be a famine lasting 7 years. Now, to be fair to Joseph, he's not perfect. He gets a little overambitious. Perhaps all the power that he has, he is second only in command to Pharaoh. He's the number 2 guy in the whole land of Egypt. Now, that might have gone to his head a little, as I said, because during this famine, people are desperate, so he buys all their land. He takes all their money, he buys all their land for Pharaoh. He enslaves the people. He buys the people basically as slaves for Pharaoh. It's a good reminder for us that though we are agents of God and for God, we're not perfect, but God uses us anyway. So here's something that I've never done, so I'm going to encourage us all to try it this week. Do you ever wake up in the morning and consider that you are, well, let's look to Joseph. He doesn't throw up his hands in despair and surrender when facing the looming famine. He also doesn't really look to God for a miracle. He does not expect God to miraculously, without Joseph's doing anything, take care of everything, though God certainly can do that. Joseph, I think, knows God is present in this. Joseph gets to work. He goes to work making a plan to provide the food that's going to give life to the people in his command. And furthermore, he implements the plan when the famine is nowhere in sight. Remember, there were 7 years of plenty before. He gets to work on this plan. There's not even a hint of a famine. All the crops are growing abundantly. But Joseph trusts God and steps out because he believes what God spoke to Pharaoh in that dream, that sure enough, there would be a famine lasting 7 years. Now, to be fair to Joseph, he's not perfect. He gets a little overambitious. Perhaps all the power that he has, he is second only in command to Pharaoh. He's the number 2 guy in the whole land of Egypt. Now, that might have gone to his head a little, as I said, because during this famine, people are desperate, so he buys all their land. He takes all their money, he buys all their land for Pharaoh. He enslaves the people. He buys the people basically as slaves for Pharaoh. It's a good reminder for us that though we are agents of God and for God, we're not perfect, but God uses us anyway. So here's something that I've never done, so I'm going to encourage us all to try it this week. Do you ever wake up in the morning and consider that you are an agent of God? Just as you are, like using those words, agent of God. Let's try it this week. Say to yourself, self, I'm an agent of God because God has given me holy work to do, and God will be present with me. I'm wondering what would happen as we went through our day if we said that. Would we be more in tune to someone whose life they're not thriving, not doing well? Would we be more in tune to notice them, to see them? Would we be more open to using our skills and our gifts for their thriving? Friends, every single one of us, as I look around the room here this morning, I think about you. The benefit of having a congregation of our size is that we know each other pretty well. And I think about all the gifts and the skills that each one of you has. We're all so different. And all of those talents and skills that each one of us have, we can put those together and use them. As a congregation, you can use them individually in your homes, in your neighborhoods. Look at the school kits we just put together. I don't know if you noticed, they're gone. They're on their way to Lowville and then on their way to MCC. Altogether, we learned yesterday that New York Mennonite Conference made over 650 school kits. That is a lot of thriving for these school kids, these children who do not have pencils and paper. They have an opportunity to learn because we acted as God's agents and participated with God in providing them supplies so they can get an education. That is not trivial. My hat's off, I'll tell you. I think we made almost more than any other congregation. Not quite, but we are still going. We have 20 more. It's wonderful. So, as a congregation, as I said, please remember that together we do have a lot of skills and a lot of talents that we can use in helping people to thrive. Are we noticing how God is nudging us toward participating in God's plan for the thriving of humanity? Are we intentionally alert? You know, I'm going to challenge you with something. I'm back. And so I'm going to challenge you with something. And me too, obviously. Are we intentionally alert to people who are in need? of life in a different way, of basic needs being met. I really believe, and I really believe we can do this, I believe it's time to strengthen our focus as a congregation and make our priority that of doing acts that continually, not just a one-time thing, but continually through our life together as a congregation, contribute to the thriving of others, to life. I thought about lots of things. For example, this building. It's got lots of space here. How can we use it to contribute to the thriving and to life that other people need? How can we do that? There's a lot to think about here. I'm going to send you these words so that you can consider them. I challenge you to consider this as you have a morning meditation, or as maybe you don't have anything formal like that. Maybe you go for a walk. Think about this as you're walking. We are God's agent, and we are tasked to work with God through the power of the Spirit toward the preservation of life and the thriving of others. So friends, let's get to work. Let's get to this holy work that God tasks us to do. Let us care for one another and for others so that we can thrive, so that humanity, that our neighborhood can thrive. Friends, may it be so.